Welcome, scholars of the shadows and chroniclers of lost aeons. I am the keeper of forgotten tales, the voice for the damned echoes of the 41st millennium. Today we will not walk the familiar paths of the Imperium, nor seek glory in the light of the Emperor. Instead, we shall embark on a journey to the deepest, darkest heart of the galaxy. We will peel back the skin of reality to gaze upon the putrescent core of a race that sold its soul to survive. Let us begin in silence, in absolute darkness. There is only the hiss of static, the crackle of a corrupted Vox recording recovered from a long-lost Ordo Xenos agent. His voice, trembling and fractured with terror, is the prelude to our symphony. Signal. Lost. They're everywhere. Emperor's mercy. They don't come to conquer. They don't come to destroy. They come to harvest. Don't fight. Don't try. Pray for a quick death. It's the only mercy you'll receive here. A sharp metallic screech cuts through his words, followed by a short, choked scream and then silence. That silence is more terrifying than the scream itself. That scream was not unique. Imagine an imperial frontier world, a place of false peace under a foreign sun. Suddenly the air fractures, not with an explosion but with a silent tear, a rip in the fabric of reality. From it pours a sickly, unnatural light carrying the scent of ozone and a dizzying sense of otherness. It is a webway portal, and from within they emerge. Tall, slender figures moving with an inhuman grace, a heart-wrenching ethereal beauty. They wear exquisitely carved armor that shimmers like insectoid carapaces in the dim light. But that beauty is a blasphemy, a mask for absolute brutality. Their weapons do not roar like bolters or hiss like laser guns. They whisper. Splinter rifles fire thousands of tiny crystalline shards, each laced with a cocktail of toxins engineered to maximize agony before granting death. There are no battle cries, no rallying shouts, only the focused silence of predators at their work and the screams of their prey. The strobing light from their weapons creates a ghastly dance of shadow and slaughter, while the attackers move like dancers in a macabre ballet. The contrast between their flawless appearance and the ruin they inflict is what shatters the human mind. They are not warriors. They are artists, and pain is their medium. But to understand the monster, we must not look only at its actions, but at the agony that created it. To decipher the cruelty of the DRUKHARI, or as they are more commonly known, the Dark Eldar, we must journey back 10,000 years to an age of unimaginable splendor and sin. Our journey today is not merely into the darkness of Kamarag. It is a psychological autopsy, an exploration into the hollow, dying heart of a race, cursed by its own perfection. Before the fall, there was greatness. The ancient Eldari race were the undisputed masters of the galaxy. They had defeated ancient foes, seeded life on 1,000 worlds, and reached a technological zenith that mankind can only dream of. The foundation of their dominion was wraithbone, a psycho-conductive material they could shape with their thoughts. Imagine that power. Anything you could conceive, you could create. They built living cities, bone towers that sang melodic dirges under twin sun structures that repaired themselves and shifted their form to match the moods of their inhabitants. Their starships were not inert metal hulks. They were sentient beings gliding between the stars on psychic currents. They created self-aware machines, mechanical servants that could compose poetry and debate philosophy. For the Eldari, nothing was impossible. They had conquered the physical realm, and now they were gods of their own creation. But when you can live for millennia, when you have experienced every art form, every adventure, every pleasure the universe can offer, what happens next? Existence becomes a symphony, played too many times. A cosmic boredom, a profound ennui begins to seep into their immortal souls. The meaning of life begins to fade when there is nothing left to strive for. This emptiness, this weariness of a soul that has lived too long, was the fertile ground for depravity. They began to seek new experiences, more potent sensations, new limits to transgress. And from this, the first pleasure cults were born. At first, they seemed harmless, lavish parties, the pursuit of new aesthetic forms. But soon, they devolved into extreme experiments in sensation. They sought the very peaks and troughs of feeling. They began to practice body modification, twisting themselves into bizarre living works of art. And then, they discovered a new sensation more powerful and addictive than any other, the pain of others. The infliction of pain, first on volunteers, then on the unwilling, became a sophisticated art form. They tortured not out of hatred, but out of curiosity to dissect every nuance of suffering to savor the symphony of screams. These were the first DRUKHARI, the seeds of Camarog germinating in the heart of a rotting empire long before the name even existed. The fall of the Eldari was not an overnight event. It was a process that spanned centuries, a slow and hideous death rattle of an entire species. The peak of this depravity was a final grand feast, a non-stop festival of blasphemy that raged across the core worlds of the Eldari Empire. Imagine billions of immortal, psychically potent beings all plunging into a collective orgy of murder, torture, and acts so vile they defy description. Every scream, every tear, every shredded soul poured raw emotional energy into the warp, the immaterial realm of the mind. They were feeding something in the ether, an entity being born from their own excess. And then it was born. Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, the youngest. Chaos God tore through the veil between the warp and real space. Its birth was not an explosion, but a psychic scream that echoed across the galaxy, a shriek that existed in both dimensions, simultaneously. On worlds across the expanse, the psychers of other races were driven instantly insane, or died outright, their brains incinerated by the psychic shockwave. At the heart of the old Eldari Empire, reality was torn asunder, creating a permanent wound in the universe, the Eye of Terror. Billions of Eldari souls were sucked into that scream, devoured by the god they had created. For the Eldari who survived on the fringes of the Empire or on the massive craft worlds that had fled beforehand, that moment was one of horrific silence. Imagine living in a world where you can feel the minds of billions of your kin as a constant background choir. And then, in an instant, that choir is silenced. Only emptiness remains. But the silence did not last. A new feeling, cold and gnawing, began to seep into their souls. A hollowness, a hunger not of the body but of the spirit. It was the whisper of Slaanesh demanding the rest of its due. The thirst had begun. Their souls were being slowly drained every day, every hour by the god they had birthed. From the ashes of a galactic empire, the survivors had to find a refuge. But no planet was safe from the thirst, from the call of Slaanesh. Their solution lay in a place that was neither of real space nor fully of the warp. It was the Webway. The Webway is not just a network of tunnels between stars. It is a separate dimension, an infinite labyrinth of psychic capillaries and arteries built by the ancient Old Ones millions of years ago. It is a skeletal space nestled between reality and hell, a place where the laws of physics can be bent. The city of Camarog was not built. It was assembled. The first Archons, the surviving leaders of the pleasure cults, did not start from scratch. They used their power and technology to drag entire satellite cities, void stations, and pocket domains from real space into the Webway. They tore fragments of their old empire loose and stitched them together in the dark, creating a colossal patchwork metropolis, a malignant tumor growing within the corridors of the Webway. Camarog is a city of stolen things, a collection of lost glories now twisted into a nightmarish form. A city needs light and power, but there are no stars in the Webway. The DRUKHARI's solution was as cruel as they were. They launched audacious raids into real space, not to capture slaves, but to capture suns. They imprisoned these dying stars in temporal spatial bubbles, suspending them above Camarog's highest spires. These stolen suns provide the city with its light and energy. But it is not the warm light of a healthy star. Their light is weak, toxic, and casts a sickly hue over everything. It illuminates the city in a perpetual baleful twilight, contributing to the oppressive atmosphere of a place that knows neither true day nor true night. Komoragogs is lit by dying suns, a perfect metaphor for its inhabitants. To understand Dark Eldar society, you must understand its economy. And the economy of Komarog is not run on currency credits or precious metals. It runs on something far more primal and valuable: pain. The true currency in the Dark City is slaves' souls, and the promise of agony or temporary relief from it. Everything is bought and sold with lives. A healthy slave might buy you a meal. A rare psyker from a distant race might buy you a sky chariot. The promise of a steady supply of victims can buy you the loyalty of a mercenary gang. In this city, the lives of others are your liquid assets. Let us take a walk through the slave markets of Port Carmine, one of the many shadowed bazaars of the city. Here, under the weak light of the captive suns, the merchandise is displayed in energy cages. Humans, orcs tow. Even species the Imperium has never heard of, all stand there stripped and assessed. Their value is not based solely on physical strength. A large orc might be cheap because it is stubborn and lacks subtlety in its expression of pain. A human, with their capacity for endurance and complex emotional spectrum, is more valuable. A captured artist might be highly prized because their sensitive soul will produce a particularly exquisite symphony of torment. They are valued based on their pain tolerance, their rarity, or their entertainment value in the arenas. Besides slaves, another vast industry is pharmaceuticals. The homunculi, the flesh sculptors, are master chemists. They create combat drugs that grant warriors superhuman speed and strength, painkillers that allow a Dark Eldar to endure horrific injuries, and more importantly, drugs that heighten the sensation of pain for their victims. These stimulants are not created in sterile labs. They are refined from bizarre ingredients from toxic flora found within the webway, and most often from the victims themselves. Spinal fluid, adrenal gland extracts, and other biological humors are harvested and transformed into the potent concoctions that fuel Komoragogs' machine of war and pleasure. Finally, in a society built on betrayal, information is a priceless commodity. Knowing an opponent's weakness, the raid plans of a rival cabal, or a secret path through the webway can be the difference between power and dissolution in a torture pit. Spy networks, information brokers, and the scourges, the winged messengers of the city, form a vital shadow economy. Secrets are traded like currency, and a well-timed whisper can topple a mighty archon or start a century-long gang war. In Kamara, knowledge isn't just power. It is the sharpest weapon. So how is a Dark Eldar born? Most are not born in the natural sense. They are made. In the laboratories of the homunculi are the vitae wombs, vast amniotic tubes containing a genetic slurry where nascent beings are flash-grown to maturity. They have no parents, only masters. They are decanted as miniature adults with an innate knowledge of language and basic skills, but a complete lack of experience or status. They are cast out onto the streets of Komoragogs to fend for themselves, known only as the Nameless. The life of a young Vatborn is a constant struggle. They form gangs fighting each other in what are known as the Kresh Wars. This is no childish game. They fight for territory, a defensible street corner, an abandoned sewer pipe. They fight for food, usually the vermin that infest the city's underbelly, or even the weaker members of their own gang. Most importantly, they fight for the attention of the cabals, the warrior organizations that rule Komoragogs. A passing Cabalite might watch a fight, and if a youth shows particular ruthlessness, cunning, or martial skill, they might be recruited. It is a natural culling process, a brutal crucible where only the most vicious, intelligent, and lucky survive to adulthood. There is, however, another class: the Trueborn. These are Dark Eldar conceived in a genuine physical union, a rare and costly affair in Kamara. To be born in this way, is the ultimate status symbol. A trueborn is raised in luxury, surrounded by slaves and wealth. They are taught from birth that they are superior in every way to the vat-born masses. Yet their life is far from safe. That wealth and status make them a target for jealousy and assassination plots. A trueborn must learn to detect poison in their food, to recognize a slave who might be an assassin, and to navigate complex political schemes within their own family from a young age. Whether born in a tube or a palace, every Dark Eldar learns the same lesson from infancy: only the strong survive. The heart of Dark Eldar society is the Cabals. These are warrior brotherhoods, noble councils, and legitimized crime syndicates, all rolled into one. For a nameless Avat-born who has survived the Kresh Wars, joining a Cabal is the ultimate goal. It is the only path out of a miserable life on the streets. The initiation process is a brutal test. The aspirant must prove their worth by committing escalating acts of violence and betrayal, often against their own former gang members. Only when they have proven their ruthlessness and utility are they accepted into the lowest ranks of the Cabal, becoming a Cabalite warrior. The life of a Cabalite remains perilous. They are the foot soldiers in the real space raids and in the endless gang wars of Comarog. They must constantly be wary of rivals within their own Cabal, who would gladly stab them in the back for a chance at promotion. But they are also given the tools of the Predator. Their standard weapon is the Splinter Rifle, an elegant firearm that fires thousands of razor-sharp crystal shards. These shards kill not by impact, but by the hyper-toxic poisons. They are coated in a brew, designed to cause agonizing convulsions before the heart gives out. For close-quarters combat, they wield razor-sharp blades, and the Agonizer, an energy whip that does not inflict physical damage but attacks the nervous system directly, causing a wave of pure, debilitating agony that can bring even a mighty space marine to his knees. At the apex of each Cabal is the Archon, its absolute ruler. But even an Archon can trust no one. That is why they turn to the Incubi. The Incubi are not members of any Cabal. They are a mercenary brotherhood, a cult of swordsmen who have forsaken all loyalties to dedicate themselves to the pure art of combat. Their origins are mysterious, but it is said they worship an aspect of Cain, the Eldari god of war, but in a darker, more selfish manner. To become an Incubi, one must undergo a grueling training process that culminates in hunting and killing a craft-world aspect warrior and claiming their spirit stone. They are the finest bodyguards and assassins money can buy. They do not speak, they only act, and their massive two-bladed claves are the last thing many of an Archon's enemies ever see. They are the embodiment of pure, emotionless martial skill. If the Cabals are the organized military might of Kamara, the witch cults are the art of violence made manifest. Witches do not fight to conquer or gain territory. They fight for the act of combat itself, for the thrill of the fray, and most importantly to harvest the emotional energy from the spectators in their vast arenas. Every witch is a supreme athlete, a gladiator who has honed their speed, agility, and pain tolerance to superhuman levels through a combination of grueling training, surgical enhancement, and combat drugs. The leader of a witch cult is a succubus. She is not merely the best warrior, but also the most charismatic performer. A succubus is a celebrity in Comarog with adoring fans and legions of imitators. Her power comes from her ability to stage the most spectacular displays of violence, ballets of blade and blood that can enthrall thousands of Dark Eldar spectators, feeding them with the psychic energy that radiates from the arena. Within the witch cults, there is a more specialized branch, the Beastmasters. They do not fight alone. Instead, they use psychic goads and chemical lures to control a menagerie of monstrous creatures drawn from across the galaxy. Imagine clawed fiends, massive reptilian beasts with claws that can tear through tank armor, or chimerae warp entities bound to physical bodies which can shift their form and attack with pure energy. or flocks of razor wings, metallic birds with monomolecular wings that can cleanse the flesh from a man in seconds. The Beastmasters unleash these creatures into the arena or onto the battlefield, creating a spectacle of deadly chaos. A night at the arena in Komarog is a sight unlike any other. Thousands of dark Eldar fill the stands, breathing an air thick with anticipation. Under the spotlights, a group of trembling captives is herded out. Then the witches appear, moving with the fluid confidence of predators. The match begins. But this is no fair fight. The witches use combat drugs like Hypex, which accelerates their reflexes to phenomenal speeds, or Splintermind, which allows them to share tactical consciousness for a brief moment. The crowd roars with every deft dodge, every precise cut. The energy from the victim's pain and fear is not wasted. It radiates through the stands like a wave, a psychic narcotic that nourishes the starving souls of the audience, sating their thirst for a short while. If the Cabals are the fist and the witch cults are the blade of Komarog, then the Homunculi covens are its diseased brain and rotten soul. The Homunculi are sculptors, artists whose medium is flesh, bone, and spirit. They are ancient beings, many having lived since before the fall. They have surgically altered their own bodies over thousands of years, to the point where they no longer resemble the original Eldari form. They are walking nightmares of flesh and bone, masters of torture and regeneration. To them, pain is not just a tool or a source of energy. It is a field of scientific and philosophical study. The lair of a homunculus is not a sterile laboratory of steel and glass. It is often a massive living organism. Imagine walking into a place where the walls are of twitching flesh that pulse with a slow heartbeat, where the corridors are lined with the rib cages of some colossal creature, and where the furniture is actually still living victims twisted into grotesque shapes to serve a purpose. A chair made of contorted bodies, a lamp made of glowing, watchful eyes. The air is thick with the smell of chemicals and decay. This is where they conduct their experiments. One of the most terrifying creations associated with the Homunculi are the mandrakes. These are not creatures made in a lab. They are entities woven from pure shadow and fear. They inhabit Elendrak, a cold, dark subdimension that lies beneath Komarog. They have a strange, symbiotic relationship with the Homunculi. They will serve as assassins capable of moving through any shadow in exchange for victims and secrets of pain that only the Homunculi can provide. To see a mandrake is to see your own fear given form just before its chilling fire extinguishes your life. Beyond the three main powers of the Cabal's witch cults and Homunculi covens, the society of Komarog is filled with countless sub-factions and outcasts, each with their own unique brand of depravity. In the toxic skies of the city, the scourges are the winged messengers. To become a scourge, a dark Eldar must undergo an excruciating transformation. The Homunculi hollow out their bones, graft sharp metallic wings to their backs, and restructure their entire bodies for flight. In exchange for this agony, they gain the freedom of the skies. They are messengers, mercenaries, and spies, soaring between the spires carrying messages and blades. Also in the sky, but far more chaotic, are the Hellions. These are youth gangs who ride skyboards, jet-powered platforms adorned with grisly trophies. They are the embodiment of anarchic rebellion, living for speed, violence, and combat drugs. They surf through the narrow alleys of the city, preying on unsuspecting pedestrians or engaging in aerial gang wars. Slightly more sophisticated are the Reavers. They are speed cults, death racers who pilot incredibly fast jet bikes. These machines are fine-tuned for maximum velocity and fitted with blades along their chassis. The Reavers engage in deadly races through the most hazardous parts of Komarog, where crashing into a wall or being sliced apart by a rival is a common end. For them, the thrill of speed and near death is as addictive as any drug. A dark Eldar raid is not a random attack. It is a carefully planned military operation, a process honed over 10,000 years of predation. The first stage is prey selection. How do they find weak worlds in a vast galaxy? Sometimes they use captured seers from other races, torturing them for visions of the future. They have networks of spies and informers throughout the Imperium. Or more simply, they monitor trade routes and vox channels, looking for signs of weakness, isolation, or a world with a valuable resource. Once the target is chosen, they tear the veil of reality. From the victim's perspective, it is a sudden nightmare. The sky can fracture without warning. The attackers seem to appear from thin air, moving too fast to track. Panic ensues. The local defense forces are overwhelmed before they even realize who they are fighting. It is absolute hopelessness in the face of assailants who are too fast, too efficient, and too cruel. After the initial resistance is crushed, the harvest begins. This is no indiscriminate slaughter. Each faction has its own goal. The witches with nets and hooks will capture the fittest and most agile specimens for the arenas. The Kabbalite warriors will gun down anyone still fighting, but will prioritize taking alive those who could become useful slaves. And following them are the homuncules torture engines, like the Talos pain engine or the Kronos parasite engine, which not only kill, but also gather flesh, blood, and other biological materials for recycling and use in their labs. And then, as quickly as they appeared, they are gone. The webway portal opens once more, and the entire raiding force retreats inside, dragging thousands of screaming captives with them. They leave behind a world that is shattered, silent, and permanently traumatized. Often, by the time an Imperial response force like the Imperial Guard or Space Marines arrives, all they find is silence, and the evidence of a horrific event they cannot comprehend. The Dark Eldar have vanished like ghosts, back to their impregnable fortress. At the top of this treacherous pyramidal society sits a single individual, Asdrubal Vecht, the Supreme Archon of the Cabal of the Black Heart, and the de facto ruler of all Kamara. Vecht's story is legendary. He began his life as a slave, the lowest of the low. But through unparalleled cunning, limitless cruelty, and masterful manipulation, he rose, overthrowing the old noble Archons who had ruled since the fall. He united the city under his rule not by absolute force, but by weaving a complex web of alliances, debts, and blackmail. Vecht is the master spider. He sits at the center of Kamara and feels every tremor. He knows every Archon's secret, every succubus's weakness. He constantly plays the factions against each other, ensuring that no one can ever become powerful enough to challenge him. His most famous scheme was the Disjunction, where he faked a prophecy of Kamara's collapse, instigated a massive civil war, and then emerged as the savior, cementing his power more firmly than ever. He is the embodiment of DRUKHARI intelligence and malice. The ultimate symbol of Vecht's power is his throne vehicle, the Dais of Destruction. This is not just a conveyance. It is a flying fortress, a deadly work of art bristling with a myriad of destructive weaponry. It is crewed by his finest incubi and escorted by his private army. When Vecht takes to the field on his dais, it is a statement of absolute power. Yet for all his power, Vecht is not free from paranoia. He constantly fends off rivals like Lady Malice, a cunning succubus said to be favored by the chaos god Segorach. Vecht is in a perpetual game of political cat and mouse, keeping his rivals busy fighting each other while he remains the true power. But in the end, every action, every scheme, every act of cruelty performed by the Dark Eldar stems from a single unifying fear: death. But their death is not an ending. When a Dark Eldar dies, their soul is instantly claimed and consumed by Slaanesh, subjected to an eternity of exquisite torture. However, the homunculi have the ability to regenerate a Dark Eldar, as long as some small part of their body remains. But there is a price. Each time one is reborn, a small part of the soul seems to be lost, worn away. This is why the most ancient Dark Eldar, like Vecht and the homunculi, are so jaded and empty. They have died and been reborn too many times. This leads to a strange truth: the Dark Eldar despise their Craftworld cousins and their spirit stones. To them, trapping one's soul in a gem after death to hide from Slaanesh is an act of cowardice, a self-imposed prison. They would rather gamble with damnation, live a life of violence and risk, than accept a quiet, static existence in a jewel. It is their final arrogance, and this brings us to the ultimate fear, the one that drives all others: true death. This is not just being consumed by Slaanesh. It is the possibility of being so utterly annihilated that not even the homunculi can bring them back. A round from a Vindicare assassin's rifle, the blade of a Grey Knight's Nemesis Force sword, or disintegration by a Necron Goss weapon. These are things that can cause true death. This terror of complete oblivion is the final motivator. The reason they fight so desperately, the reason they cling to their twisted existence at all costs. So what is the life of a dark Eldar? It is a tragedy, an endless loop of suffering. They inflict pain on others to temporarily soothe the pain within themselves. The gnawing of the thirst. They are parasites on the galaxy predators who exist by consuming the spirit of others. They are the products of a great fall, cursed to live in the shadow of their ancestors' sins. But in that eternal darkness, a stray glimmer of light has appeared. The rise of the Inari and the birth of Iniad, the Eldari god of the dead. This represents the first potential path to salvation for the entire Eldari race in 10,000 years. Iniad promises a release from the clutches of Slaanesh, a death that leads not to torture but to rebirth in a new god. Some dark Eldar, weary of the cycle of violence, have followed this path. However, most DRUKHARI and Asdrubael Vect in particular vehemently oppose the Inari. Why? Because they have lived in cruelty for so long that they cannot or will not imagine another way of life. Malice has become their identity. Salvation would mean abandoning everything they have ever known, giving up their power, their entire way of being. For Vect, the Inari are a threat to the order he has so carefully constructed. They would rather rule in hell than serve in heaven, and so the cycle continues. Look there in a darkened alley of Kamara. A young dark Eldar, a Vatborn who has just survived another Kresh war, looks up at the impossible spires of the city. In its eyes you do not see fear or despair. You see hunger, ambition, and a cold, calculating cruelty. It will climb by any means necessary. It will kill, betray, and torture. It will become a monster to survive. This leads us to our final question, one that only you can answer. When you have been cursed for long enough, does the curse become a choice?